Thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
I was watching a YouTube video a couple months ago called How to Correctly Eat a Mango. Because I'm done fucking around. And before the video, there was one of those ads. You know those ads? I could skip it after 5 seconds, but I ended up watching the whole 13-minute ad. And it's because it was an ad for this charity. It was very moving. It was an ad for this charity that gives reconstructive surgery to babies born with cleft palates. And it was very moving. It bounced around, but it kind of focused on this one baby who was almost adorable. And I was, let me finish. They're the ones raising money for this shit, not me, okay? In fact, I was so moved. I've never done this with a YouTube ad. I went to the link. I donated $5. And they had a little box. You could write the parents. So I was just like, I hope that's enough to close the gap. Oh, I'm sorry, did you donate $5? Then shut the fuck up and let me finish this joke. Because I spent so long watching it that now all my ads are for cleft palate babies. And it's the same one every fucking time. And I want to help them. I gave $5, if you recall. But sometimes I get home, I just want to watch bloopers from The Office without fucking God's bloopers first. And it go away. I deleted my history, didn't work. I changed browsers, didn't work. And then I donated $6 to Planned Parenthood. Baby disappeared.
Good morning. It's Monday, Talk Radio Monday, September the 23rd, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Talk Radio's America. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, CNN News Central.
Did you know that Election Day has already begun? Early voting is happening in 3 states, but we are 42 days away now until the actual Election Day. Brand new polling this morning showing one of the tightest races ever. More on the new numbers from key battleground states is ahead. And breaking news overnight, at least 100 people are dead as Israel escalates its attacks on Hezbollah inside Lebanon. This is a fast developing story this morning. We are live on the ground with the very latest. And also, more breaking news for you. We are getting a little newer look at a letter the suspect in the second attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Brand new details, what he wrote before he was arrested, as he's expected in court this morning. I'm Sarah Seidman with John Berman. Kate is out this morning. This is CNN News Central.
And that's CNN News Central. And now we're going to go to Varney and Company. Hold on. Okay, so now Varney and Company.
Everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow. Barron and Company picks it up. Stu, take it away.
All right. Good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. Kamala Harris has a plan, an economic plan. She's about to tell voters all about her opportunity economy. She is responding to voters who say they don't know what she would actually do if elected president. The vice president had an excellent weekend for raising money, and then some. She raised $27 million on Sunday alone in New York. But she will skip the Al Smith charity dinner. The tradition is that the two leading candidates meet for a good-humored roast of each other. Harris's team says that she will spend the time campaigning instead. A lot of people asking just who is running this country after the First Lady took over a cabinet meeting. It was the first cabinet meeting in 11 months, and she, not the president or vice president, ran it. Who's in charge? Tomorrow, it is a weakened President Biden who will address world leaders at the United Nations Summit in New York. Donald Trump looking good in 3 battleground states. It's a New York Times CNN poll out today. He scores well on the economy. However, national polls from NBC and Nate Silver show Harris with a slim lead. This is a very tight race. To the markets, no sell-off on Wall Street after a solid week last week. The Dow up maybe 60, NASDAQ up maybe 66. Bitcoin, $63,000 and change, 63.3 right now. Treasury yields are rising. We have the 10-year coming in at 3.76, and the 2-year well above 3.5% now. It's at 3.60%. Oil, $70 a barrel, $71 a barrel, sorry. Gas, little changed. We've got a gallon of regular averaging $3.20 around the country. Diesel, no change at $3.57. But look at gold with all this renewed tension in the Mideast, up $5 at $2,651 an ounce. On the show today, escalation on the Israeli-Lebanon border. Israel has told Lebanese residents near the border to evacuate for their own safety. Netanyahu insists he will do whatever it takes to return Israelis to their homes, those Israelis who've been displaced by Hezbollah's rockets. It is Monday, September the 23rd, the first trading day of fall 2024.
And that was Varney and Company. So there you have it. You have CNN News Central versus Varney and Company. You decide. Thank you. And now a little bit more of Varney and Company.
Now this. This is a tough thing to say. The president's authority is fading. His decline is becoming more obvious. You keep hearing it. Who is running the country? What does the rest of the world think of us? Biden stumbled at his meeting with foreign leaders over the weekend, lost his train of thought, and embarrassingly forgot to introduce India's Prime Minister Modi. Hours earlier, he handed over his first cabinet meeting in 11 months to the First Lady. Jill Biden ran the meeting, and maybe she's running the whole country as well. Shouldn't it have been Kamala Harris stepping in to prop up our ailing president? Yes, it should, but Harris is keeping a distance. She doesn't want to be entangled with failure. Tomorrow, the president addresses world leaders at the United Nations Summit in New York. It is probably his last major event on the world stage. It'll be difficult to come out of this looking strong. Starting with Afghanistan, Biden's foreign policy has been a series of failures. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they've been emboldened. Our rivals dictate terms to us. The latest failure is the escalating fighting in the Mideast. Biden and Harris allowed domestic politics to get in the way. Worried about the Muslim vote in Michigan, they called for a ceasefire, which would have given Hamas a victory. They negotiated with Iran and got nothing. They urged restraint on Israel as it fought for its very existence. It is a weakened American president who looks out at world leaders from the UN podium tomorrow. The worry is that a President Harris would be no different. Second hour of Varney just getting started.
And that was Barney and Company. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the patriotic short.
Why did the Germans consider American soldiers the most unpredictable opponents? It wasn't just firepower. The Germans quickly realized Americans fight differently. They broke the usual tactics, did not follow strict patterns, as, for example, the British or the Germans themselves. One of the brightest manifestations of the unpredictability of the Americans was their willingness to attack, even if they were outnumbered. The Germans often underestimated small American units, believing that they would not risk attacking large garrisons. But the Americans went in for the assault, capitalizing on the effect of surprise. Courage and determination often compensated for the numerical superiority of the enemy. Another trick of the Americans was to create false positions. They could leave empty trenches, light fires, and call for German attacks on the empty positions while they were outflanking or preparing for a counterattack. This played into their tactics and confused the enemy.
And that was the patriotic short. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of motivation.
I do, especially when we're desperate. Winning's not loyal to you. It doesn't care about you. Winning doesn't care how sore you are. Winning doesn't care how much sleep you get. Winning doesn't care how hard you work at times. Winning requires all of you and then more, and it promises you nothing. It's a mastermind of creating fear and doubt in your mind. It causes setback after setback. So the question is about winning. Are you willing to sprint when the distance is unknown? And why chase this thing called winning? Because the only thing that's guaranteed in life, if you don't chase it, is losing.
Now is the time to grind. Now is the time to show the world that I was placed here for a purpose.
There's a kind of instinct that you need to be on the lookout for, and this one is a liar. This one is a saboteur. This one is a backbiter. This is the instinct that says, you've had enough. You've given it your best shot. You can stand down. You can back off. This is the instinct that says, it's okay to stop. It's okay to settle. It's okay to give up. You can rest now. That's the instinct, that's the defense mechanism. It wants to give you an out. And that is the instinct you need to fight. You need to push back, to smash into the ground.
Don't negotiate with weakness. You're in charge. Get up. Go to class. Get up. Do your homework. You wake up earlier than people. You stay later than people. You stay humble. You work harder than anyone when no one's there. I guarantee someone that feels bad about themselves soon will label you as he's built different. He's built different should be your label because people feel bad about themselves.
You're lighting exactly what you wanted. Because every day, you've had choices to make. You're responsible and credible for every single choice. You've made the choices.
And what I need you to do for me is why are you here, and then take ownership of why you're here. So you control you. We don't have forever. Let's not act like it. We're all going to die. And so I don't act like I'm going to live forever. So every opportunity I get, I murder it. Process driven. I love it. I'm about that life. I get up every morning at 3 o'clock. When I want to get up, when I don't. When I feel like it and I don't feel like why? Because I'm process driven. I'm not feelings driven. Champions are not feeling driven. Champions don't get up when they want to. And if we're going to be champions, process driven. Don't stop when you're tired. Stop when you're done.
You know know what I hear? I hear the clock ticking. Time waits for no man. Life goes by, and it goes by quick. Don't waste those years. Don't waste them. Live them. Back off? Negative. Not happening. In fact, I'm stepping it up. No complacency. No complacency. No backing off. No slack whatsoever. Bring it. Fight. Fight that ticking clock with everything you got. And the earlier you get in the game and get on track, the better life you're going to have. Healthier, wealthier, stronger, smarter, better. Go through the motions. I don't really want to work out. I work out. Don't really want to get up and get out of bed. I get up and get out of bed. Don't give in to the immediate gratification that is whispering in your ear. The desire to take the path of least resistance, the downhill path, the easy path. Shut that down. Do not listen to that little voice. Instead, go through the motions. Lift the weights. Sprint the hill. Get out of bed. Get things done. And by simply going through the motions, you stayed on the righteous path, the disciplined path, which is right where you know that you belong.
If you grind on Monday, and you grind on Tuesday, and you grind on Wednesday, but you chill on Thursday, and you chill on Friday, and they grind on Thursday, and they grind on Friday, sooner or later they're going to catch you. I told every kid in America that tell me they're coming for me, you're going to work hard for it. Because I'm going to find out what the benchmarks are. I'm going to reach the benchmarks, and I'm going to excel that thing. You will not outwork me. I'm going to grind. I'm going to fight. I'm going to work. I'm going to press toward. I'm going to do everything in my power every single day to become a victor and not a victim. This is the part where life demands that you make a vow, come hell or high water, that you're willing to pay the price, where you earn your spot with effort, with sweat, with blood, with tears. It's time to test your will, your endurance, your heart, to test your limits.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
Seeing things as the person at fault does. Whenever someone has done wrong by you, immediately consider what notion of good or evil they had in doing it. For when you see that, you'll feel compassion instead of astonishment or rage. For you may yourself have the same notions of good and evil, or similar ones, in which case you'll make an allowance for what they've done. But if you no longer hold the same notions, you'll be more readily gracious for their error. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 7.26. Socrates, perhaps the wisest person to ever live, used to say that nobody does wrong willingly, meaning that no one is wrong on purpose either. Nobody thinks they're wrong, even when they are. They think they're right. They're just mistaken. Otherwise, they wouldn't think it anymore. Could it be that the slights you've experienced or the harm that others have done to you was not inflicted intentionally? What if they simply thought they were doing the right thing? For them, even for you. It's like the memorial for Confederate soldiers at Arlington, obviously a cause that was wrongly fought for by people doing wrong, which states in part that the Confederate soldiers served in simple obedience to duty as they understood it. Again, they understood wrongly, but it was their genuine understanding. Just as Lincoln was genuine when he ended his famous Cooper Union speech by saying, "Let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it." How much more tolerant and understanding would you be today if you could see the actions of other people as attempts to do the right thing? Whether you agree or not, how radically would this lens change your perspective on otherwise offensive or belligerent actions?
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
A lot of the critics of religion today will say, well, isn't that nice? Religious people, they don't really know these things. They can't prove them scientifically. They have no good arguments for them. Rather, they're playing a kind of make-believe. I'll believe certain things on the basis of no evidence. That's not what believe means when serious Christians use the term. It does not mean accepting things wildly on the basis of no evidence. It's one of the most misunderstood words in the religious lexicon. Authentic belief is never infra-rational. What I mean is it's never below reason. It's always supra-rational. It's beyond reason and inclusive of it.
And I also want to say is that this is where religion and religious people go wrong, is being asked to prove the existence of something that is foundational, that is axiomatic. God is the status quo. We do not have to, not as conservatives, have to prove or justify the status quo. When people ask you, why is it that way? The answer is, because it is. And if they want to do something different, then the burden of proof is on them. The history of humanity is the history of religion. Religion and God have been around since the beginning. Atheism is the person that came late to the game. They're the ones that all of a sudden come up and say, oh, hey, I got an idea. How about no God? Okay, prove it. The burden of proof is on the atheists. Always remember that. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "The battle of philosophers is a battle for man's mind. If you do not understand their theories, you are vulnerable to the worst among them," unquote. That was Ayn Rand, Philosophy, Who Needs It? From the book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the 33 strategies of war.
From the book of Psalms. It is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. My companion stretched out his hand against his friends. He violated his covenant. His speech was smoother than butter, yet war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you should vote Republican because aggression against others reverses into aggression against the self. The more a person contains aggression against others, the more strict and coercive the conscience becomes. The internalization of violence also proves useful to the exercise of rule. It ensures that the obedient subject internalizes the external ruling authority, making it a part of itself. This allows the authority to rule with far less effort. Symbolic violence is also a violence that makes use of the mechanism of habit. It inscribes itself within the things that are taken for granted, in habitual patterns of perception and of behavior. Violence is naturalized, as it were. Without the effort of physical, martial violence, it ensures that the established ruling relationship is maintained. The psychological internalization of force also serves disciplinary ends. By way of subtle, discrete interventions, it infiltrates the subject's neural paths and muscle fibers, subjugating it to outside ortho and neurocorrective compulsions and imperatives. The wholesale violence of decapitation, which prevails in the society of sovereignty, yields to the violence of successive subcutaneous deformation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Talk Radio's America, Chapter 20.
20. The relationship sours. For Talk Radio, the Obama presidency would mark an important milestone. The moment when the medium became more hindrance to Republicans than help. That moment, however, would come in 2011, after Republicans regained control of the House. Before that, Talk Radio coalesced around Republican efforts to impede Obama's agenda. Republicans were on the outs during the first half of Obama's first term. Democrats controlled both houses of Congress and, for 7 months, in 2009 and early 2010, had enough votes in the Senate to overcome a Republican filibuster. While this was the sort of powerless position from which Republicans previously could have expected Talk Radio's full-throated support, signs of the medium's growing consternation were visible. When it came to special elections and primaries, Talk Radio repeatedly went its own way, though doing so meant harming Republicans' chances of winning back Congress. And even before Republicans returned to power, Talk Radio firmly and finally gave up GOP moderates. In the early Obama years, Republican Talk Radio outreach continued at its usual energetic pace. Indeed, some staffers worked harder than ever. During the intense 2009 debate over the Affordable Care Act, Senate Republicans' Talk Radio point person spent 20 hours a day clipping audio from floor speeches and passing it along to hosts virtually in real time. She also arranged hundreds of interviews and directed several radio rows. In one case, she put together a radio row on a mere week's notice. When it was over, the exhausted staffer's boss asked if she could set up another later that week. Even with Republicans struggling for legislative relevance, talk radio continued to cast its spell over Congress, albeit in ways less visible than before. This subtle influence arguably was on display during the 2009-2010 effort to pass the financial regulatory reform bill that came to be known as Dodd-Frank. As Robert G. Kaiser describes, every time Senate Banking Committee Chairman Chris Dodd and Republican Ranking Member Richard Shelby seemed close to a bipartisan agreement, Shelby hardened his position. At times, Shelby also seemed hamstrung by his caucus, preventing him from negotiating freely. Discussing negotiations between Dodd and Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, Kaiser writes, "Once, a senator who was a potentate in his own right, in most matters a free agent who could build his own alliances and pursue his own goals with colleagues in either party. But in the modern era, every senator was subject to party discipline, and they all knew it. Rule changes played a role in this shift. But we might also see conservative media, and talk radio in particular, as a silent force behind the impasse between Shelby and Dodd." As Kaiser notes, Shelby dreamed of chairing the Senate Appropriations Committee, which made him leery of crossing McConnell and fellow Republicans. If Shelby did upset his caucus, his Republican colleagues on the Appropriations Committee would hesitate to vote for him as chair. So Shelby had to safeguard against allegations of disloyalty from leadership and rank-and-file colleagues alike. Supporting Dodd's bill, which appeared to have few Republican votes behind it, was a huge political risk, especially for former Democrats such as Shelby. Talk radio would undoubtedly have tarred him as a rhino and campaigned against any future ascent to the chairmanship. This was precisely the sort of small, inside baseball matter that talk radio could influence. Few Americans cared, and the decision would be made only by Republicans, most of whom had far more to worry about in primary elections than general elections. Talk radio could make the committee assignment seem like a matter of core principles, compelling Republicans to choose between voting with hosts or facing severe backlash. Talk radio also affected delicate legislative processes through the threat of transparency. 25 years before Dodd-Frank, senior members would have negotiated quietly in private, but talk radio made the backroom a perilous place to be. Over and over, hosts provided a sympathetic outlet for disgruntled conservative leakers. By going to talk radio, they could scuttle deals no one even knew about. That meant Shelby, and Republicans broadly, courted disaster with every secret concession. It might escape notice, but it also might not. So the watchword was caution. Dick Armey considered this elevated transparency talk radio's principal source of impact on the legislative process and public policy. The medium made legislators more accountable, which in turn made it harder to pass legislation through regular order. In Armey's words, politicians did not respond to increased accountability with very much courage. Instead, they often resorted to passing vague legislation in moments of crisis and allowing the executive branch to fill in the details. To legislate in the talk radio era demanded nerve and daring that ambitious, risk-averse Republicans such as Shelby were loath to demonstrate. Shelby spent 2009 and 2010 fighting tooth and nail for Democratic concessions to Dodd-Frank, and even after he won several, voted against the final bill. In 2018, he got his Appropriations Committee chairmanship. This was a far cry from how legislating worked when Shelby joined Congress in 1978. If hosts were traditional political actors, Unified Democratic control would have prompted talk radio to revive the pragmatic posture it adopted in the early Clinton years. Hosts would have accepted the few moderate Republicans who survived the wave elections of 2006 and 2008, and they would have boosted any Republican on the ballot in hopes of restoring GOP congressional majorities. But the political and media landscapes had changed dramatically over the previous 15 years. And the Limbaugh who would chide conservative single-issue voters or back the then moderate Mitt Romney for Senate was no more. In general, that kind of conservative media was hard to find. Talk radio would help Republicans only insofar as they resisted President Obama and pursued a purely conservative agenda. Otherwise, congressional Republicans, no less than Democrats, were the enemy. Republican support for insufficiently conservative moves, such as the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, inflamed the conservative grassroots, including many hosts, who used their microphones to voice the base's fury. Under such circumstances, pragmatism held no attraction for talk radio. Any ideological slippage on a host's part would give ground to farther right media, potentially alienating listeners and harming the bottom line. And politically, hosts were free to move to the right and keep up with online upstarts. They no longer faced the burden of supporting a governing party and its necessary compromises. They felt no reason to look the other way or to focus on Republicans' conservative achievements, as they once had. In 2006, Hannity and caller Ken agreed that the dangers of Democratic control demanded that conservatives remain loyal to the Republican Party, no matter its failings. But now there was little to lose. Talk radio seized the moment by pushing for a purer GOP shaped in its image. Talk radio's gloves-off posture matched listeners' rising anger during Obama's presidency. Many of those angry listeners joined a new movement that would have considerable impact in Washington: the Tea Party. Hosts were good at reading and projecting the feelings of their Tea Party-heavy audience. But while it might be tempting to see the Tea Party as the cause of talkers' increasing aggressiveness, that interpretation misses the mark. Hosts certainly did channel listener sentiment, but they also drove it. Many hosts began souring on moderates and compromise years before the Tea Party movement coalesced. The shifts on talk radio were a harbinger of the movement, not a response to it. In fact, many hosts helped to shape the priorities of the Tea Party. As Theda Skocpol and Vanessa Williamson explain, the Tea Party cannot be understood without recognizing the mobilization provided by conservative media hosts and bloggers. Media impresarios have done a lot to create a sense of shared identity that lets otherwise scattered Tea Partiers get together and feel part of something big and powerful. Media hosts also put out a steady diet of information and misinformation, including highly emotional claims that keep Tea Party people in a constant state of anger and fear about the direction of the country and the doings of government officials. It was in the Tea Party era that talk radio fully matured as a rhino hunter. A case in point is Limbaugh's handling of a carbon cap-and-trade system enacted by the Democratic House in June 2009. Conservatives viewed the policy as a tax. On the day it passed, Minority Leader John Boehner lacerated the bill on the House floor and then blasted it again in multiple talk radio appearances. But talk radio was no blindly loyal ally to Boehner's party. Such an ally would have kept the spotlight solely on the Democrats driving the legislation. Limbaugh, however, was outraged by the 8 moderate, mostly northeastern House Republicans who voted for the bill. He accused them of selling out for campaign contributions from Wall Street types who stood to benefit from carbon credit trading. These 8 Republicans made this happen, he fumed. But the matter did not end there, with a standard fare Limbaugh tongue-lashing of GOP Judases. "This whole bill is so un-American," he declared. "Everybody who voted from it from Pelosi on down needs to be jacked out of there in the next election." Here was something different. Here was America's preeminent conservative voice calling for the defeat of elected Republicans. Not just any Republicans, but ones who would surely be replaced by Democrats. To pick one example from the 8, Congressman Mike Castle hailed from Delaware, where a moderate was the only kind of Republican who could win. Delaware elected its lone U.S. representative statewide, and the Democratic presidential nominee had won the state by an average of 15 points in the elections of 1996 through 2008. A hard-right candidate could never match Castle's popularity across the state, though the representative and former governor were vulnerable against a more conservative primary opponent. That a conservative nominee would have little chance in November was hardly a concern to Limbaugh, however. It made no difference if all 8 moderate Republicans were replaced by Democrats, so grievous was their crime against conservative principles. Because 2009 was an election off year, rhino hunting opportunities were mostly limited to 5 House special elections and local races, some of which became arenas of intense focus. One was the race for a vacant New York congressional district, which pitted liberal Republican State Assemblywoman Didi Scozefava against Democrat Bill Owens and Conservative Party candidate Doug Hoffman. President Obama had captured 52% of the vote in the district, suggesting that a strong conservative such as Hoffman would have a hard time winning the seat. The Republican Party backed Scozefava. Gingrich, now on the sidelines, and Boehner endorsed her, and the National Republican Congressional Committee spent over $900,000 bolstering her candidacy. Limbaugh, Hannity, Levin, and Beck all endorsed Hoffman. "See, I'm a conservative," Hannity said, explaining his opposition to Scozefava. "I'm not a Republican. I'm a Reagan conservative." He drew a parallel between the special election and Reagan's primary challenge against Gerald Ford in 1976. In both cases, the party had strayed from conservative principles, and only a revolt would right the situation. Limbaugh was enraged that the party would back Scozefava over Hoffman. "We actually have 2 liberal Obama Democrats, one calling herself a Republican," he argued, "and you've got the Reagan conservative Hoffman in there." "I ruined 2 hours of my day when I saw that the Republican Party was running ads against Hoffman. They have a death wish. The Republican Party has a death wish. Gallup, 40% of Americans now say they are conservative. 20% say they're liberal. 36% say they're moderates. And of those 3 groups, which one is being ignored? Not just ignored. Which one is being attacked by the Republican Party? The conservatives. The Republican Party as constituted is as dangerous to this country as the Democrat Party is. When Scozefava withdrew from the race and endorsed Owens, the Democrat, Limbaugh responded with glee. Another moderate had been exposed as an unprincipled liberal. Didi Scozefava has just delivered a teachable moment for those who lack a keen sense of the obvious, he told listeners. Rhinos cannot be trusted. They aren't principled. You vote them into office, and you're going to get cap and tax. You're going to get some version of Obamacare. You're going to get tax increases. You're going to get TARP bailouts. You're going to get amnesty. Owens defeated Hoffman in the election. But again, this mattered less than imposing talk radio-style conservatism on the GOP. Although talk radio scorned moderate Republicans in the Tea Party era, there were moments when their goals happened to overlap. Another special election, with the highest of stakes, found hosts boosting a moderate Republican, Scott Brown, who was running against Massachusetts Attorney General Martha Coakley in a January 2010 election for the Senate seat previously occupied by the late Ted Kennedy. Talkers had a huge impact on the race, thanks in part to more robust web tools and social media, which made talk radio an even greater financial powerhouse for Republicans seeking campaign contributions. Conservative hosts had several reasons to pull for Brown. If Brown won, Democrats would be deprived of the 60 Senate votes they needed to pass a final version of the Affordable Care Act, or any other legislation, without concessions to secure at least one Republican vote. At the time, both houses had passed versions of the health care legislation, but they still needed to reconcile the two bills. The race also carried deep symbolic significance, because the seat had been in the Kennedy family for all but 26 months, dating back to John F. Kennedy's election in 1952. And while hosts might have opposed Brown's moderation on many cultural issues, he was at least a solid fiscal conservative. As the race progressed and tightened, it catapulted into hosts' field of view. Brown would go on shows, mention his website, and watch the traffic and donation numbers spike. Accordingly, his advisors increased his bookings on conservative media. Talk radio in particular drove donations. Staffers would discover clusters of donations from unexpected zip codes at odd times of day, say from Boise at 10 o'clock at night. It turned out that the race had been discussed on talk programs airing on tape delay in the relevant markets. A mention by a national talker could produce up to $20,000 in donations. In the week between Christmas and New Year's, mentions by Ingram and Herman Cain, filling in for Hannity, brought in hundreds of donations apiece. Brown's campaign came up with a money bomb, a multifaceted effort that included a media blitz designed to generate a burst of donations on January 11th, 8 days before the election. They hyped the money bomb on social media and other sites. They also built a site that took pledges and, on the designated day, reminded donors to pay up. Also on the appointed day, Brown appeared with Ingram in the morning and Hannity in the afternoon. The results dramatically exceeded the campaign's expectations. They raised $1.3 million on the 11th alone, and that turned out to be the campaign's weakest online fundraising day that week. Donors were encouraged to fill out a form telling the campaign how they heard about the money bomb, and four of the most popular sources they listed were Fox, Hannity, Radio, and Ingram. Remarkably, Brown came out on top in one of the most liberal states in the country. His victory dealt a major blow to Democrats and buoyed Republicans heading into the 2010 midterms. But while talk radio was no doubt cheered by the outcome, hosts and listeners weren't looking for more Scott Browns. His case was a fluke, albeit one that demonstrated the enduring and expanding power of talk radio. In the 2010 Delaware Senate race, that power swung sharply against a similar moderate, seriously undermining the Republican Party in the process. The race was another rare GOP chance in a blue state. Castle, the state's congressman, was the perfect Republican for the seat Democrat Joe Biden had vacated when he became vice president. Castle's moderation, his DW nominate score of 0.229, made him the 9th most liberal House Republican in the 111th Congress, and his lifetime American Conservative Union score was a middle-of-the-road 51.69, positioning him as the GOP's best bet in a state that typically rejected strident conservatives. Castle had been winning elections in Delaware since the mid-1960s, and most analysts considered him the heavy favorite against Democrat Chris Coons in the general election. But the primary split conservatives. While the establishment backed Castle, the Tea Party, and talk radio hosts wanted Christine O'Donnell. A conservative activist with a checkered history, O'Donnell had lost the 2008 Senate race to Biden by almost 30 points. That result was a glaring warning sign about her chances against Coons, but Hannity at least didn't care. Christine O'Donnell, the establishment, is just trying to assassinate her character, smear her, he told his TV audience. And here's a guy, Mike Castle, voted for Obamacare, voted for TARP, voted for cap and tax. The establishment wants him. In fact, Castle hadn't voted for the health care law, but the damage was done. On election night, as it appeared O'Donnell would win, Hannity justified his support for the surefire general election loser and argued that voters had made the right choice. I don't think we can make progress in this country with rhino Republicans. I don't think you are going to stop Obama's radical agenda without people that are really committed to cutting taxes, to stopping spending, really strong principles. How could this guy be one of several Republicans to vote for a killing bill like cap and tax and expect conservatives in a primary to vote for him? You know what? I'm sorry. He brought this on himself. The race prompted Limbaugh to announce a Limbaugh rule to replace what had been known as the Buckley rule. In an earlier time, conservative luminary William F. Buckley urged primary voters to pick the most conservative candidate who could win a general election. The Limbaugh rule counseled differently. In an election year, when voters are fed up with liberalism and socialism, when voters are clearly frightened of where the hell the country is headed, vote for the most conservative Republican in the primary, period. Clearly, Castle was not that. He would be just another liberal, but he's going to have an R next to his name, Limbaugh said. Now somebody tell me how that helps the conservative movement. I can understand the Republican Party being for Castle, but I don't understand people who profess to be conservatives supporting this guy. Limbaugh acknowledged the risk of running O'Donnell in November, but, he explained, the bigger risk to me is that rhinos, Republicans in name only like Mike Castle, tarnish the conservative brand. They confuse and turn off the electorate who end up thinking, well, they're all alike. It was an exact 180-degree turn from Limbaugh's position 16 years earlier when the king of talk helped Republicans retake the House by arguing that GOP moderates provided advantages over Democrats. Now, he contended, that moderates diluted the conservative brand and had no business winning primaries, let alone seats. Michael Medved was a lone voice in the wilderness on conservative talk radio, lamenting that so many of his colleagues demonized Castle, who had been a very good governor and a fine member of Congress, and emphatically not the enemy. Medved regretted talk radio's shameful posture and denounced hosts backing the moron side in the election. But he was drowned out by the chorus of purity seekers. Talk radio threw its full weight behind O'Donnell in the general election. The day after the primary, when Limbaugh encouraged his listeners to donate to O'Donnell's campaign, the response crashed the candidate's website. The call for support produced over $1 million in contributions in 24 hours. It didn't matter. Coons crushed O'Donnell in November 56.6% to 40%. The position of conservative hosts in 2010 reflected years of evolution. Whether or not their views had changed, the political landscape had shifted in ways that left them emboldened to express those views even at the expense of the Republican Party. In 2004, when Toomey challenged Specter, only one elected incumbent Republican senator had lost a primary election in the previous 24 years. In that case, New Hampshire's Bob Smith, the second most conservative senator in his final Congress, according to DW Nominate, likely lost over fears that he could not win the general election, not because he was thought of as insufficiently conservative. Dating back to World War II, only 8 elected Republican senators had lost primaries. Yet in 2010 alone, conservatives got O'Donnell over Castle, and before that, denied renomination to Bob Bennett of Utah and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Republican senators deemed excessively moderate or pragmatic. Murkowski went on to win re-election as a write-in candidate. The most conservative forces in the country were ascendant within the party, making once unthinkable results reality. The substantial advancement in web technology, which allowed talk radio to become a more muscular fundraising force, also significantly enhanced the odds of defeating an establishment-supported moderate. These changes in technology, in conservative activism, in attitudes about conservative purity, meant that hosts could be confident of their prospects for unseating moderates. In the Clinton days, hosts primarily used their influence to help advance the party's goals. Under Bush, hosts clashed with leadership more frequently and used that influence to hold members accountable, but seldom by directly threatening their seats. By the time Obama was in office, hosts could wield their influence to evict from the party the ideologically indefensible. For talk radio in 1994, party leadership meant putting as many Republicans in Congress as possible. In 2010, it meant driving moderates to the brink of extinction. Damn the consequences.
And that was Talk Radio's America, How an Industry Took Over a Political Party That Took Over the United States, by Brian Rosenwald and read by Christopher Grove. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to trust yourself and trust your conscience.